This feature, The Future of Work, is funded by the News Reporting Scheme.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Future of Work on Clare FM. Lisdoonvarna in North Clare is one of many towns and villages in the county that have had to work hard to retain essential local services. We've seen schools and childcare facilities, GP and other medical services, as well as shops and post offices close. Some villages in Clare have none of these services today. The knock-on effect of this, aside from the loss of important local jobs, is that it makes it very unattractive for anyone to want to live in these areas. Not that long ago, the people of Lisdoonvarna managed to save their local post office after a lengthy campaign. Joe Garrihy is chair of Lisdoonvarna Fáilte and knows the value of local services and jobs in the community.
Well, they're everything, Pat. They're part of... obviously the local economy has to be working. People can only live somewhere that they can make a living, that they see a future. So to see jobs in an area, especially rural areas, is critical to their survival. It's at its core, and how those jobs are created and where they come from is very area specific based on its location and where it can access jobs. Whether you're near the larger centres like Shannon, Limerick, Galway, we're here in North Clare, which is over an hour and a half possibly away from Limerick. Same for Galway. So having activity locally for people to be working in is critical.
People might be happy enough to go to Shannon or to Limerick for a job. They prefer to stay here. Everything here is location specific. You might be able to have some industry or some jobs here. How difficult is it to get jobs in and keep them?
Well, historically, you're in the middle of agriculture and tourism are the two core areas, plus the services that the state bring in terms of teachers, doctors, medical services. Historically, times have changed an awful lot in the last 30, 40 years. There was carpooling from here down to Shannon, from Fenor, pick up people in Lisdoonvarna. They'd all carpool and go down to work in the factories in Shannon. Similar over to Galway when we had the likes of Mikey McNamara, who started a building company here in Lisdoonvarna, to going on to become one of the biggest in the country, back as far as, the 80s. So a lot of those things with the building crash, have dissipated. The capacity to provide local employment is really important, and a lot of teachers in a rural dynamic as well, they come in, they don't live in the area, where in the past you would have had the teacher, the guard, they'd have all been living in and around small towns. So a little bit of a different dynamic than when you lose people like that to the area and they're driving from Ennis or from everywhere else. So, we've a fantastic childcare centre here, which is another part of the social enterprise that you're here standing in Lisdoonvarna Fáilte's property, which is very fortunate to have a multi-service centre. And one of the things it does is provide childcare. There's 20 people employed there, over 100 children. So those kind of anchor a reason to be somewhere, if you like. Employment will follow that because it requires services. So your capacity to help yourself in rural is much more important than it is in the bigger centres.
In those bigger centres, are you concerned that people don't appreciate the value of services to a local community, a small community? Maybe they take the services in their own area for granted.
Yeah, well, you find in that context, when I'm working with my colleagues in the chamber in Ennis, a lot of the services are provided by the state and the local authority in your area, and you have a natural catchment within larger settlements. And I suppose that's the dynamic internationally, that people are being drawn into the bigger centres because they want to be able to access the services easily. So in a rural area, you kind of have to work an awful lot harder. And in a lot of cases, like these centres, say we'll use Lisdoonvarna Fáilte, you see Ober in Newmarket, which isn't, a fully rural area, but what they provide, it's a small social enterprise that the state doesn't do. And if you can do that in a multi-service manner, then exponential benefit, and people can come, as we talk and go back to the childcare here. If that childcare centre wasn't here, you'd have 100 families that would have no reason to come, if you like, to the small town. They couldn't work. They couldn't have that service for their kids in the early learning. So that's a real anchor. Last year, like a lot of rural areas, we struggled to hold on. Our post office was, at the 11th hour, it was saved because somebody stepped in. That would have been another huge negative. When you take away a service that people travel to, then you lose a reason to go there. and then you go somewhere else. So as that happens in our small settlements and small villages and small towns, people move on to the next place where they can get it, and all of a sudden you're gone into a spiral of dereliction.
How tough is it to hang on to the services you have? Fighting for the post office, that was a tough outing.
It's like post-traumatic stress disorder, Pat, when you mention it, because it went to the last week of that not being there anymore. If it was lost, it was not coming back. It's really difficult because it all feeds into that footfall viability. The state gives some support to post offices, and thankfully that's been increased this year, but still to have them viable is difficult. You're looking at having to have them part of shops in a lot of cases. So you have to be very agile. You see a lot of our farming community that were the anchor of life in rural areas before. The supports and the transitioning to where they need to be, it needs to happen quickly, because, a farm or you lose a post office, then it's so much harder to get it back. So in rural, you have to be a lot more flexible. You can't just be one thing in a lot of cases to sustain a service, like even the town that we're beside here, like Lisdoonvarna in the past, and others like it, compared to like Kilkee. They were depending very heavily on tourism, agriculture, and that kind of spend to maintain the economy. So one of the biggest things you need to be in rural is adaptable and flexible.
If someone is looking for a job in North Clare, they want to come to live someplace in North Clare because of the fresh air, the sea, the quality of life, what jobs are they going into? And are there jobs there?
In the last number of years, we've seen, I think, a great hope in the context of people being able to remote work, which brings a different, if you like, it's almost like a new industry starting up, where the challenges around how many people can retain and work on a farm. We've seen some really diverse people moving to North Clare, in particular, in rural areas. Like, I hate to mention the term COVID, but it accelerated a bit of a quality of life. You mentioned the fresh air and the ocean, and you see the beauty around the likes of North Clare, Lahinch, the Burn that you travel through today. You can't eat fresh air, so you need to be able to generate income. We've seen an awful lot of really great people who can work for a company in New York or Dublin or London, and they can still live in North Clare. That's a real big hope, I think, for rural areas, because when they come, they bring possibly a future family, they bring kids for schools, they bring new ideas and a different way of thinking. You can see the regeneration of Innistyme and Lahinch, particularly with people moving in. They're really creative people, and they're coming for a lifestyle choice, but they're also very talented and have a lot to bring. A lot of positivity and new ideas to bring, and that's really positive. But you have to follow that with services, and it's something I found when I moved back here over 30 years ago, and I've seen a lot of people move home with ideas of growing up. You still need childcare, you still need social interaction, you still need places where people go and meet, along with the job and the capacity to make a living. So it's not just about having a house. You need the job, but you want to be part of a community as well. And that's where the multi-service areas, the sports fields, the parks, the childcare, the halls, the community events, that's what, they were our marts long ago, and the pub, and making hay. So in the modern world, and going to church, going to mass, the world has changed. Not everybody does those same things now. So I suppose the meccas of where you want to live, you want to be part of a community. What happens to allow you to do that? It has to be interaction with other people.
Have you noticed in the 30 odd years you've been here that young people are still packing their bags after they leave school and move away? Or do you find that most people who leave school might go on to college, come back to Lisdoonvarna to work?
That's my profile. I left after school and I went straight to Dublin and became an electrician, and I went to America and came back. I came back because I remembered a really great place that I grew up and the attachment I had with it. I went to America because a bit of a recession started in the 80s and there was no work, so I went working and playing football and kind of carefree, like a lot of the young people you see today. Like my son is in Florida today. He's out in college, and he went there because he's obviously well educated. He wanted to experience somewhere else, like all of us probably wanted to, a lot of us wanted to. But you would hope that the draw home is a potential to come back, maybe not necessarily to the exact rural place, but to Ireland. And they're the challenges. One of the things that I suppose motivate me about trying to make some little bit of a difference is that there is somewhere, like for me, that I wanted to come back to, that when you do, there's somewhere that can offer you that genuine opportunity in. You might come back to Ireland, and still be able to come home to the Lisdoonvarnas or the Kilkees or the Flagmounts or Boston, wherever.
But a local community like Lisdoonvarna would always hope that their own would come back to keep the town alive?
Yeah, that is absolutely what you want, but the majority don't. I suppose that's the reality, and I suppose I lived in the States for a while, and I see, again, Michael there now, and I suppose living in the one place all your life isn't something that, it's like having the one job all your life. It's not realistic. You may move from place to place. You'll move because the place is able to offer you what you want at that stage of your life, and I think that's the challenge for us, to be in a rural context, that at a certain stage of your life, you won't want to be in a small, rural, sleepy, small town. But there is a certain stage of your life that you will really want to be there. Like I came back and raised my family here. There is nowhere in the world that you could do it better, or no finer place to be. So you want that to be there. Our challenge is, I think, in a lot of ways, is can we make rural the place that you can be at all stages of your life? That's a very lofty aspiration and unrealistic maybe, as we see people as they get older and that they need more services, and that's why I think small towns are so important, because services provided locally as near as they can be to where you live or you're attached to. Services provided locally by local people, like you look here and you see the Ober Meals on Wheels van. We're a hub for distribution of community meals around the Lisdoonvarna and the parish here, partnering with Ober in Newmarket and Fergus. That's a lifeline and a contact for a lot of people who are living on their own or maybe coming back from an operation. So we've gone here in this multi-service centre from, we started off talking about 110 children in a childcare service, but at the other side we provide community meals on wheels, and you come here tomorrow night and it'll be full with people playing bingo, or you come here this evening and St. Brecken's might be playing a match over there. I think that's the flexibility. To do one of those things on their own might be difficult to make it viable, but because you can spread resources to support each of them in the same centre, I mean, obviously I'm involved in it, so I think it's a good model. And it's a challenging one, and it needs more support from the state, because all those benefits that are being given by a community and voluntary organisation with professional people working, there's no commercial viability to that. There's no business going to come into a rural small town like Lisdoonvarna and say, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set up a Meals on Wheels. It's not viable. Childcare, another challenge, done under a community umbrella. And in a lot of other countries, like particularly I think Italy, that social enterprise model, properly supported, was able to deliver those services in the local area.
When you're talking about jobs, Joe, in a town like Lisdoonvarna, our example today, where does the onus lie with keeping or doing your best to keep the jobs you have, but getting more jobs into the area? Is that something that Lisdoonvarna Fáilte does? Is it something for the local authority? Is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of a lot of entities like that. Like the local authority is responsible and should be responsible for providing the infrastructure and making places and supporting places with funding to make them attractive, not just for being able to live in, but there's investment encouraged into it. And I'd very particularly talk about, in that way, tourism, because this is a town. And you see a lot of towns like Kilfenora as well beside us, Fenor, Ballyvaughan, they depend a lot on the tourism spend. And that's challenged at the moment. But where the local authority, and particularly in Clare, I think, have a responsibility that they have a journey to travel on to be what they could call, or in my view, successful, is if the tourism attractions like the Cliffs of Moher and the Burn mean that footfall means that hotels are invested in by hoteliers for tourist accommodation that actually keeps the economy going. And then you have chefs and you have rooms and you have all of that. I think that's a journey for rural Clare when you have a UNESCO Global Geopark and the Cliffs of Moher. I think that's a challenge we haven't lived up to yet, because that's about footfall. We have a great opportunity because we have numbers of people coming, say, to the Cliffs of Moher. But how much benefit are they if they're in a bus that ends up back at the Clarion for tea? And I think we have a responsibility like the local authority, whereas you have the organisation then like Lisdoonvarna Fáilte, and you see the Burn Centre in Kilfenora, very similar, working really hard, voluntary led. They need footfall, and it's the responsibility in my mind of the local authority and Fáilte Ireland and government to invest in those places, but also to invest in the strategy around how footfall is steered around these places to drive them in. Private investment will then follow, like hotels. We're looking at a hotel across the way here, one of the original hotels in County Clare, the Hydro Hotel, and we're looking forward to that reopening with a vibrant operator in the next few weeks to come back. But the state has to follow with footfall, and with strategy that drives people there and marketing, and that goes all the way then down to Shannon Airport. We want people flying into this region if you want balanced regional development. Lisdoonvarna Fáilte then, with its assets like the old Spa Wells complex down there that's going into dereliction, that needs state help and state support and footfall to be viable in the future. So all those actors need to sit around the table and answer the question, I suppose, that you started off with, or in your mind. Why would people want to live, and what would make them live, and what's sustainable about a small town like Lisdoonvarna? And it is all of the components doing their part at the table to pull that together.
That was Joe Garrihy, Chair of Lisdoonvarna Fáilte, based in North Clare. We'll be back next week with another episode of The Future of Work.
This feature, The Future of Work, is funded by the News Reporting Scheme.